Warren Buffett's a smart guy, and he's got many down-to-earth, easy-to-understand rules that if you apply them, can change your life. In fact, there's one Warren Buffett rule that made it possible for me to retire at 59, and in fact, I could have retired at 50 because of this rule. Let's go for a walk and we'll talk about it. You know, there's times in your life when you make a decision that makes all the difference in the world. And during the financial crisis, I made a decision that changed the financial tack of my life and my wife's life. Now, I've been a financial advisor for over 20 years. At the time I was a financial advisor, I had already started working as a financial advisor. But candidly, my wife and I were probably too conservative in our investments for the age that we were. And it's just who we were, right? It's important. There's these guidelines for what the right asset allocation is, what percent of your portfolios in stocks, what percent of your portfolios in bonds. There's guidelines, there's things that I as a professional do to help my clients choose the right asset allocation. But ultimately it comes down to this. You've got to be able to stay the course during scary times. When the market's down, you've got to be able to stay the course and weather through that change. And when the market's doing really well, you have to be happy with your results. Because if you're not happy, if you're not stable and able to stay the course in both of those situations, then over time you're going to make some mistakes. So what's the one rule that Warren Buffett had that helped me out? And that was to be courageous when other people are fearful. You know, my wife, when I was in my 30s and 40s, my asset allocation was 60% stocks, 40% bonds. And, you know, candidly for me, in hindsight, that was way too conservative. Now, not many of us get a do-over in life, but I was fortunate. I did get a do-over. The 2008-2009 financial crisis happened, and stock market prices dropped to where they were 20 years earlier. And when that happened, my wife and I started to put more money into stocks to the point where before it hit the low, unfortunately, but pretty close. By that time, we had reallocated and we were actually 100% stocks. And then the stock market continued to go down another 10 or 15%. Now, top to bottom, the stock market went down almost 60%, the S&P 500, from the highs in 2007 to the low on March 9th, 2009. But my wife and I got a do-over. And that made all the difference in our lives. In fact, as I said, I could have retired when I was 50. I chose not to. I was enjoying what I was doing. I had nice balance in my life. I liked the people I worked with. I liked my boss. So I was very fortunate in that regard. But my wife and I got something few people get, and that's a do-over. But it's not enough to just get the do-over. You have to come up with an action plan. So in my case, I knew that we were too conservatively invested. That warm, cozy feeling in the center of the herd, that can be a really expensive, warm, cozy feeling, right? The warm, cozy feeling with your money in the bank, where you don't have to worry about when the stock market goes down, that warm, cozy feeling comes with a price. And the price can be substantial. It's not unusual if somebody's too conservatively invested, it's not unusual for that to impact them in a way that they have to work an extra 5, 10, 15 years. That's a big, big price. And that's where my wife and I were, right? We were too conservative. And I think many people that are good at saving, my wife and I are good at, mea culpa, we're good at saving. Many of us that are good at saving also tend to be too conservative in our investments, right? The pain of loss, because we know how hard it is to save money. The pain of loss is so great that it forces us to be overly conservative. Now, one of my rules is to take no more risk than what you need to take to achieve your goals. But in my case, at the time, I was not financially independent. And one of the goals is to become financially independent. And then at that point, you have to ask yourself, what's your next goal? You know, are you trying to leave a legacy behind? Do you want to be able to leave each of your kids a set amount of money? Is there a not-for-profit cause that you care about? And if you still have goals, then it's okay to keep the asset allocation where you are. You want to, every year you want to be revisiting that. You want to work with a professional and make sure you've got that right. But once you become financially independent, then job number one is don't lose that financial independence, right? Another Warren Buffett thing is have few eggs in your basket, but watch that basket very, very closely. In fact, what I just shared is another Warren Buffett rule, which is, you know, once you get wealthy, you know, job number one is don't lose money, and rule number one is don't lose money, and rule number two is never forget rule number one. And I think that's wise advice. That's wise advice for any of us, because working an extra 15 years because you're too conservative in your investments, that's a big price to pay. You know, oftentimes I have people say, "Hey, Azul, why should I use a financial advisor?" And you know, the reality is no financial advisor can tell you that they're going to beat the S&P 500. If anybody does tell you that, run from them. First off, it's against the law to say that, but it's just not smart to say that. And it shows a level of hubris. It shows a level of overconfidence that can get expensive. So why should you use a financial advisor if they're not going to beat the S&P 500? You know, it's because of the value of helping you make good decisions in difficult times. Think about, you know, my wife and I actually being too conservatively invested. Now, I knew I needed to change it, and the question was, when do I change it? I didn't want to go from being 60% stocks to 80 or 100% stocks when the market was at an all-time high. Now, did I know the market was going to fall 60%? I wish I did. I'd be a very wealthy man. No, I didn't. But I knew I didn't want to do that at all-time highs, and I had a game plan that was probably going to take us 5 or 7 years to transition over to that. So why should you use a financial advisor? Reason number one is if you have a good one, they're going to help you make good decisions, and that should make a huge difference. In fact, you know, it doesn't take that big of a mistake. You know, a lot of financial advisors charge 1% a year. It doesn't take that big of a mistake if you're doing it yourself for you to lose 10%. Super easy for that to happen. And that is 10 years worth of fees that you could have paid to have somebody alongside you to help you make good decisions. And that's what I think is really the value of a good financial advisor, is they help you make good decisions before it becomes difficult to make good decisions. And then if you're in a difficult situation, you know, as I record this, the market's at all-time highs. It's crazy high. There's another, this turns out it's going to be the Buffett video. There's another rule, really not a rule, it's a way to value the stock market. And Buffett looks at what's the value of all the stocks that trade in the United States, and then what's the gross domestic product of the United States. So what's the value of the companies? What's the value of the companies in a country divided by what's the value of the economy in that country? And right now, we are 2 standard deviations away from the high, and I think that puts us like in the, you know, we're in the stratosphere. We're like in the upper 10%, the upper 20% of all valuations. So you want to make good decisions, particularly when the market's at all-time highs. If you've gotten in front of your skis, if your asset allocation maybe has too much exposure to stocks, boy, it's a lot easier to make that change when the market's at all-time highs. If your asset allocation, if you're thinking the things that I've just shared resonate with you and you're like, hey, Azul, I kind of have that warm feeling in the center of the herd, and I don't want to have to work an extra 10 or 15 years for that warm feeling, and you want to get more exposure to stocks, then think about what I said earlier. For me, how was I thinking about changing my asset allocation? It was not, the plan was not to do it over a short period of time, but opportunity came calling, and fortunately, I was able to follow that Warren Buffett rule. I was prepared, I had thought about it. When minds were calm and life was easier before it got scary with the stock market and the stock market being down that much. So in calm times when I could make a good decision, I made a good decision. And I was prepared to wait to execute on that. Unfortunately, I was given an opportunity that changed my life. And I want you to make decisions that are going to change your life for the better. And that's why I made this video up here that talks about why waiting to 65 to retire might be a big mistake. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.